Jai, Jai. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivaj Kachashtatira Sato Sri Srimad Chidandi Goswami Shilesi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivaj Kachashtatira Sato Sri Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasani Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Samabhita Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from the 10th canto, the 10th chapter of the 2nd canto, and it will be text 18, correct? Mukatastalu nirbinam Jiva tatropajayate Tato nana rasa jagye Jivaya yodigam yate Mukatastalu nirbinham Jiva tatropajayate Tato nanarasa jagye Jivaya yodigamyate. Others? Mukatastalu nirbinham Jiva tatropajayate Tato nana rasa jagye Jivaya yodigamyate. Mukatastalu nirbinam Jiva tatropajayate Tato nana rasa jagye You like to do it, Tita? Mukatastalu nirbinam Jiva tatra pajayate. Tato nana raso jagye. Jivayayo tigamyate. Mukataha, from the mouth. Talu, the palate. Nirbinam, being generated. Jivha, the tongue. Tatra, thereupon. Upajayate, becomes manifested. Tata, thereupon. Nana rasaha, various tastes. Jagye, became manifested. Jivas, jivaya, by the tongue. Ya, which. Adigamyate, become relished. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. From the mouth, the palate became manifested, and thereupon the tongue was also generated. After this, all the different tastes came into existence so that the tongue can relish them. Purport. This gradual process of evolution suggests the explanation of the controlling deities, Adidaiva, because Varuna is the controlling deity for all relishable juices. Therefore, the mouth becomes the resting place for the tongue, which tastes all the different juices of which the controlling deity is Varuna. This suggests, therefore, that Varuna was also generated along with the development of the tongue. The tongue and the palate, being instrumental, are adibhutam, or forms of matter. But the functioning deity, who is a living entity, is adidaiva, whereas the person undergoing the function is adhyatma. Thus, the three categories are also explained as to their birth after the opening of the mouth of the Virata Purusha. The four principles mentioned in this verse serves to explain the three main principles, namely the Adhyatma, Adidaiva, and Adibhutam, as explained before. Om Ajnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shafakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangulam Gayate Girim Tad Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Bharavanam. Hare Krishna. This chapter has been titled Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. Do we turn this thing on? Yes, here we go. Okay, Hare Krishna. For me, this chapter is the provocation for all kinds of questions. The promise is that I will find the answers, but I have to say that this particular verse, and many of the verses in this chapter, for me, raise more questions than they give answers. I trust the answers are there, but I am not such an expert spiritual scientist to discern them. But let's try. Let's try. Let's try to see what questions we can answer through this verse. The first question that comes to my mind is in the first sentence. Srila Prabhupada talks about gradual evolution. Now, today we have the big question of evolution. And often our response is that the living beings, these species of life, come into existence simultaneously at once. Whereas the scientific or modern, not scientific, but the modern contemporary attitude or theory of modern, Prabhupada would call them so-called scientists. He would use other words too, but I don't have the authority to use the terms that Srila Prabhupada used. Anyway, the position of contemporary science is that, yes, evolution is a gradual process, that the species of life evolve gradually. And here we also find gradual evolution. But it's not so much, as described here, the evolution of the particular species of life, but the evolution of the ingredients, the material existence itself, the things that make life, or material life. The senses, the sense objects, and this is the interesting aspect, the controlling deities. This chapter, and that is the next question topic. So first we have the interesting concept of gradual evolution that helps us to sort of, in some way marry the contemporary analysis, the view that because we do see evidence of species changing into other species. We see some evidence in the fossil record, we see some evidence in our observation that living species change and they evolve, something happens, something goes on, and so the characteristics of a particular species change in some way, and then they become a little different, and then that becomes a little different. The theory is that this is all random, that these changes, mutations, take place by chance, and that the mutation that survives because of the law. Now we get from chance to laws. The theory that there's a law or a rule that mutation or that quality that is most fit will survive, and the others that are weak will go away. So in this way, there are theories for evolution based on chance and natural law, but no controlling deities, no controllers, no life, no living energy that is, how does it say, managing the affair. Throughout this chapter, we hear this term controlling deity. If you review many different places, we find this term, controlling deity. We also find these three terms, which are explained here, and they're explained in several places throughout this chapter. Adibhotik, Adidhaivik, and Adhyatmik. So the answer to the questions, because what is the fundamental question which is being posed in this chapter is, what is this world and how did it come into being and who are we, where are we? The other day, visiting with my family, and one family member has made a big fish tank in his house, and a little aquarium with these pretty big fish that he said started off like this and now we're like this. Anyway. And we were watching these fish, and they're moving around, and he threw some food into the tank, grabbing at the food, maybe fighting each other a little bit. And I said, look this is it. Eating, sleeping. He just before this, he was describing how, at some time, this is the place where they sometimes, they sort of sleep down there. Eating, sleep, and he was also describing how two of them he thought maybe were having children. Eating, sleeping, mating, and they were defending their, this is my food, and so on. And I said, this is the material life. What's the difference? If you'd simply eat and sleep and mate and defend, there's no difference. What is the difference? What makes the difference? It's when the inquiry, asking questions, questioning is what distinguishes the animal life from human life. If in human life we do not question, then we're no better than animals. And what kind of questions is the most important thing? Because we can go on questioning, where am I going to get my next meal? That question is another kind of animal question. I mean, we could suppose that these fish in the tank were also running through their limited consciousness some form of questioning, okay, when's the food coming? Is that fish after me or not? When's it time to sleep? Oh, that's an attractive fish. So we may suppose that in all species of life, there's some form of questioning around these animal activities of eating and sleeping and mating and defending. So if our questions revolve around those things, then we're just a slightly more advanced than the animal life. It's when we question our existence, who we are, that we actually begin. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. When we begin to question what is true reality, who we are, then we can say that we have begun human life. And where do we go to find the answers? We can attempt to answer these questions through the power of our intellectual faculties, through the power of our reason, through analysis. And what is explained here is also explained through a system of analysis called Sankhya, which analyzes the material world and breaks it down into its different component parts. But that analysis through observation will fail to find that which lies beyond our power of observation. And therefore we have to come to the Srimad Bhagavatam to hear about the answers to all questions. So as we said, the beginning question is, who am I? Where am I? What is this world? And this chapter particularly brings out this perspective of existence based on these three principles: Adhyatmic, Adibautic, and Adidaivic. Now, Adibautic, we perceive the world. Adhyatmic, we perceive ourselves. We're all conscious and aware. Cogito ergo sum. I think, I'm aware, therefore I am. Perhaps all of you have had at some point in your life the question of, do I exist? And perhaps even the question, does anything else exist than me? Yes, I exist. Obviously, I exist, but how do I know anything else truly exists, or I'm simply dreaming? I'm simply creating it out of my own dreaming capacity. But we have a sense that we all do exist. I mean, there's certainly a sense that in the same way that I exist, you exist. So we perceive Adhyatmic, we perceive the Adibautic, but where's the Adidaivic? Who amongst us perceives the controlling deities of this world? Even the concept that everything, this verse begins, and it's interesting also that Srila Prabhupada uses the term suggests in this purport. He is acting like a scientist and taking information from the Bhagavatam previous verses and so on, and saying, well, this particular verse suggests, it doesn't say, but he's inferring, he's seeing that, okay, this is there, this suggests, and what does it suggest in this particular verse? It suggests the explanation of the controlling deities. And that's where my questions start. Okay, it does, all right. Let me try to figure that one out. Okay, So the gradual process of evolution suggests the explanation of the controlling deities because Varuna is the controlling deity for all relishable juices. Okay, well that sentence really, I mean, we have a real intellectual here, Krishna Kripa. So maybe he can explain this. But I was like, whoa, what does that mean? How does Varuna, being the controlling deity for all relishable juices, suggest the explanation of the controlling deities? The gradual process of evolution suggests the explanation of the controlling, because, so I'm trying to, this is my attempt here. Please forgive me for my inabilities, but trying to understand this sentence. So the gradual process of evolution suggests the explanation of the controlling deities. So we're trying to explain now this concept of the controlling deities, which is very difficult. We don't see the controlling deities. We don't see Varuna, Agni. We don't see, I mean, how many? There's 33 crore. 330 million. Sometimes we get there, it's 33 crore. That's 330 million. Adi Daiva. Everything. How many here have had COVID? Okay. Yeah. How many here got brain fog during COVID? I did. And I remember sitting there. How many of you got wiped out? You know, like you couldn't move, right? So I remember during that time sitting down. I was sitting. I could get into position. That much I could do, you know, with my legs crossed. But that was it. You know, I was just. And I started thinking about what happened. I thought I was the controller, right? I thought I had control over my body. I could move it when I wanted. But no amount of willpower, I mean, actually that's not true. I could, if I really, really summed it up, I could get off it and get up. But it took this, you know, and I was thinking, how little, I don't have control. And what to speak of getting well? What to speak of, well, so how many here are mechanics? Any mechanics here? Fixes cars? Gets under the hood? Yeah, you know, you could change an alternator. I can change an alternator, but that's about it. Spark plugs I can change. I can change the oil. But beyond that. But there are those who can open it up and take it apart and put it back together and make it work. But here I had this machine. What is it? How is it? Ishvara Sarvabhutana. Videsh Arjuna Tishtati. Brahmayan Sarvabhutani. Yantra Rudhani Mayaya. That we're all riding in a machine. And these machines break down, and then we try to fix them, but we have no power to do so. But there are entities throughout this universe who have power to control the energy of this world. And they're doing it. We don't see them. They're called, as Prabhupada says, the controlling deities, the adidhaivic element of existence. And this process of gradual evolution, as described here, suggests this. Now, how does it suggest it? Prabhupada says, because of Varuna being the deity of relishable juices. So I've been trying to put this together, and what I've come up with so far is that this verse and other verses that show how things come one by one gives the indication that the elements, the different, I should say the principles, Prabhupada calls them the principles. It says the four principles mentioned in this verse. Okay. Now I'm really confused. The four principles mentioned in this verse serve to explain the three main principles, namely the Adhyatmic, Adideva, and Adibhota. So the four principles are, what are the four principles? From the mouth, the palate becomes manifested. After that, the tongue, and then the tastes. So we have the mouth, the palate, the tongue, and the tastes. And Srila Prabhupada says that Varuna is the controlling deity for relishable juices. So the juices infer the tastes that the tongue can relish. They come from the palate, that come from the mouth. And what's the mouth? That's in the previous verse. The living force, being agitated by the Virat Purusha, generated hunger and thirst, and when he desired to drink and eat, the mouth opened, the palate became manifested, the tongue generated, tastes come into existence, and Varuna, the specific jiva, and this is in another verse. Yeah, when all this is begins in text 8, right? In text 8, we get a little more hint of this, because here we get the principles introduced. The individual person possessing different instruments of senses is called the Adhyatmic person. And the individual controlling deity of the senses is called Adidaivik. The embodiment seen on the eyeballs is called the Adibhotic person. And then Prabhupada gives us the fundamental, the supreme controlling summum bonum is the personality of Godhead in his plenary portion of Paramatma as the supersoul. And all the controlling deities are different manifestations of the Paramatma feature. But then he goes on to describe that the Adidaivik principle are also living entities. The controlled living entity is called the Adhyatmic person, and the controller is called the Adidaivik person. So, again, the information is here. The answers to all questions are here. We don't have time. I don't have time. I was given this verse this morning after Mangal Arti. I did chant a bit, so I didn't spend the whole morning trying to figure this out, but I see a lifetime. And that was what Srila Prabhupada indicated. That if you are scientific, if you want to be a scientist, here it is. There's a lifetime of inquiry to understand this material world and to appreciate the existence of living force within all aspects of existence. We see ourselves as living force. We experience ourselves as living force. But then we see the world around us and it appears to be inert matter. And we think that it's just us. We have life, we can manipulate the world to enjoy it. We don't see the life within the material world that is controlling even the rays of the sun, that is controlling the air that we breathe, that is controlling the movements of our arms, that is controlling the taste that we experience. We don't see it. We don't perceive it. And so we don't believe it. We don't believe that such entities exist. And we go about our business ignoring the devas, ignoring the deities of this world. But they don't ignore us. They have control. In a hierarchy, there's the big ones at the top, there's the little ones. I mean, there's 330 million, so they have to be organized in some fashion. They have a king, Indra. They have, of course, there's the primary deities of Brahma and Shiva. Vishnu, of course, is Krishna, but he's taken a role, so to speak. And then we have Surya and Varuna and all the different planets, right? We have Mangal and they have their own planetary powers. So we're surrounded. We're infused. We're through and through. There's life, not just our own, but there's life, living energy throughout, just like there's 4G and 3G and waves that we don't see. So there's the waves, there's the power, the controlling power of all these daivas that are suffusing our life, suffusing the world, but we don't see it. Now, if we want power in this world, there's the place to go. I mean, they have the power. So if you want power in this world, then you undergo yogic systems, karma, khandha systems, various types of processes that can link you with these powers. But what is the use? We can get power, all of us. If we choose, we can pursue the techniques and processes of material power acquisition by cooperating and connecting with these powers. And the processes for doing these are set out in various Vedic literatures and described by various yogis, etc. But the end result is that we will again enter into the body of Mahavishnu at the destruction of this material world. We'll again come back into this material universe. We'll again have to we'll have to take birth. We'll have to suffer. We'll have to get old. We'll have to get to. We will again do this again and again and again and again and again, eternally. So what is the use? All of this description in the Srimad Bhagavatam to help us understand where we are, what's going on, what is this world, is presented with a message. Here, the Bhagavatam, other scriptures may present this information with the message, well, if you do this right and you do that right and so on, you get better and you get more power and you can raise yourself to the higher planets and you can do that. But the message here is very, very different. The message that Sukadev is giving us as he lays it out, he's not withholding anything. Of course, he describes it in very short and very difficult, it may be called the answers to all questions, but as I said, it's not easy to understand. But what is the answer? The real answer to all of these questions is Jiver Swarup Hoy Nitya Krishna Das. Or as Krishna says, Ishvara Sarvabhutani Hrideshya Arjuna Tishtiti. You're wandering. This is just what you are wandering in this Brahmayan. Brahmayan mean, what is it? How does it go? Brahmanda Brahmeti Kona Bhagyavanji. The Brahmanda Brahmeti, wandering in this Brahmanda. The fortunate soul receives, by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, the seed of bhakti. To get out. To get out from under the control, the influence. To get out from under the miseries that come from these adi-daivik, adi-atmik, adi-bhotik sources. To come out from under the modes of nature. To become free. Become free of this prison. Yes, they are controllers, these 330 million devas. But what are they controlling? They're controlling a prison house. And they're also in it. They're also in it. They're also going to have to die. They have to defend themselves. So the message is different. The message, the answer to the question, the real answer is, let us go out. Hare Krishna. I'm sorry, I should have left some time for comments and questions. But if you had asked any questions, I probably could not have answered them. So, you're going to still try. Okay. You can make a comment. You can answer a question. Yeah, it's not that that no one can see them. They do become visible to some. And in past times, 5,000 years ago, they used to visit this planet and they used to manifest themselves. They used to be all around and do things. One day I was thinking about the Pandavas. I was thinking, okay, here we have Pandu leaves the world and Madri and Kunti are discussing who will follow him. And by entering the fire. And they decide that Madri gets to go and Kunti has to stay behind. But they were both very willing. But then think of the time. These are the time when they, they would see these demigods. They knew, okay, I just get in that fire and I'll go and I'll be with him. And they saw, it was not just faith that I should do this. They could see this world that is described here, these devas. We don't see them now. Maybe some do. Well, everyone, the idea of the devas is there in all cultures. Everyone knows about them because, they're there. Even in Christian theology, there are, what are they called? seraphim and cherubim and angels and all kinds of entities that are invisible to us. Sometimes they become visible. Gabriel. Yeah. So, but the message is chant the holy names of Krishna and go back to Godhead. But don't disrespect the demigods in the way.